Hi Raluca, thank you for joining me today for our Women Who Make It Happen series.
Thank you for having me, Michelle.
You're welcome. Would you be able to introduce yourself, please?
Sure, so I'm Raluca Efford. I am currently Chief Operating Officer of Vemi Money. It's a Fintech who is building a digital Sharia compliant bank in the UK from the ground up. So I am responsible for overseeing operations from customer operations and experience to procurement, third-party risk management, resilience and governance. I've actually joined Vemi about 18 months ago, initially as the head of mobilization, so basically running the bank build program across the various functions and running the regulatory engagement as part of that process, and then transitioned into my current role as Q a few months ago as part of our overall readiness for launch. We are very much in build phase, so all of my energy right now and focus is on building the operational engine that will deliver the products and service our future customers.
Sounds a very exciting venture.
It is indeed, it is.
And I know that's been slightly different to some of your earlier career to date. So would you be able to talk me through what motivated you to get into financial services and what that looked like for you in your journey?
Sure. So I actually didn't start my career in financial services despite graduating with a degree in economics and that being the most obvious career path, perhaps. But I didn't think financial services was quite fun. So I wanted to be part initially of a more fun industry. So I joined media and marketing industry. I was helping clients from the retail and telco industries build their go-to-market strategy. So I was very much on the agency side. And it was there from the very early days of my career that I focused on digital. And digital at the time was the new cool kid on the block, which gives you an idea about how long ago this was, that digital was up and coming and growing. But it was working with the big tech players, the Google and the Microsoft and the Facebook of this world, that gave me the first taste and the first hands-on experience of using technology to drive better business outcomes and better customer outcomes. And so when the call came a few years down the line from financial services, from Direct Line Group, with a brief to build their digital capabilities in-house in the aftermath of their IPO, I said yes. I said yes. And once I've joined Direct Line Group and built that and solved that particular problem, I then thought, okay, what else can I solve? What else can I learn? And then I started picking up different projects outside of my job spec or remit, and it ended up transitioning out of marketing and doing a bunch of roles in corporate strategy, transformation, and operations. And I suppose that is a trajectory that got me to where I am today.
Very interesting. How did you find, like, knowing that the Q path was the right one for you? Well, to start with, and definitely at the very beginning of my career journey, I had no definitive plan. And that's coming from a planner. So I'm a planner at heart, but with my own career, I wanted to keep my options open. So I had no definitive plan that I was going to stick to, because I always thought of it as opportunities will come along. And if you're very fixed and rigid in your mindset about what good looks like and about what the next step or the next job title needs to sound like, then you might miss out on some really great opportunities just because you've closed off your mind the possibility of that looking somehow else or something different. And so I was very happy to just concentrate on doing roles that would, one, push me outside of my comfort zone. So would it push me? Would it stretch me? So if that's a tick. Second, I was thinking, could I be good at it? Could I really make a difference in that space? And could I trade off the skills and experiences accumulated up to this point in exchange for that new learning? And thirdly, I always looked for, would it be a place that I would enjoy or a role that I would enjoy? Would I enjoy working with this team or with this line manager? And I think for me, if it ticks those boxes, I always tended to say yes. So the coup, I did crystallize a coup ambition at some point, but it wasn't until the second part of my career when I was moving out of marketing, transition out of marketing. I was doing the MBA. So then I started to figure out that the skills I'm acquiring are leading me towards perhaps a trajectory of a senior operating role, a core role. But up to that point, and even since that point, that kind of idea of would it push me out of my comfort zone, and could I be good at it, and would I enjoy it, are still kind of the main driving factors in evaluating opportunities as they come along.
Yeah.
Rather than a job title or anything else.
Yeah, I think if it's predetermined too much, like you said, you might choose not to follow a potential role that might have given you those learning points. It's an interesting one as well with the digitalisation and transformation a lot in the market at the moment, in the industry, where the coup is central to a lot of that, a very pivotal role. Mm-hmm. How have you navigated some of the changes or challenges from the bigger corporate institutions over to in the fintech of where you are now?
Yeah, that's a great question, because and the shift is real, I think. And also I was mentally, of course, prepared for leaving an organization of 10,000 and joining an organization of 10, because it was only about 10 people.
Completely different.
Completely different, right? Going from office spaces, fancy office spaces that were overlooking River Thames to a small office space in a rented office space of maybe 4x4 or 5x5, where we had 8 desks in. But so there was definitely some big changes. But for me personally, I didn't feel it was a radical shift in many ways, because I've always done fast-paced roles. So I've never had probably quite a slow-paced or 9-to-5 kind of roles before. So I was used to the fast pace. I've always been quite hands-on in terms of delivery, and very happy to learn or graft or figure things out.
Yeah.
But I suppose what you almost can't prepare for until you're actually there in the fintech space, in the startup space, the mentality is quite different. And people are, you're designing things from scratch. You're designing products and experiences from scratch, and you're solving problems or encountering problems that nobody probably has encountered before of the group that you have. So it's a real test of one's resourcefulness and ability to really dig deep and figure things out, because you don't have all their supporting infrastructure, all the processes and tools and controls mapped for you that you might have in a large organization. So you really have to figure everything out and try your hand at new things. So there's definitely been a shift, but I, for one, really thrive with that kind of change. But I can appreciate it's not something that necessarily would be suited to everyone. But I, for one, really enjoyed the change.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And there is that adoption of sometimes you have to be involved in different things in a startup that not necessarily is what a coup might do in a bigger institution. But how hands-on you may want and need to be, I think, comes down to like mentality of, the fintech and where they're up in the startup to scale up phase as well.
Exactly, where companies in their maturity curve matters a lot. And for me, one of the appeal of joining Fintech and joining a startup, a small organization, is that breadth in what a coup or senior operator would have, because simply you cannot afford to have that kind of deep specialism. So you have more variety. Yeah. And I really enjoy that variety. And so for me, it felt like a natural progression and a natural step. But it is for sure quite different to the pace and the mentality of large organizations, or at least in my experience, it is different.
That interest from you and the passion comes across very easily and quite a lot when you talk about liking that fast-paced environment and that you've always been doing it, but you thrive in that environment as well. How have you kind of like managed that career transition then? So what would you say your success factors have been?
I would say, first and foremost, personally for me, it was this idea, you have to have this inner confidence and inner trust in yourself and back yourself, that you'll be able to figure it out. I think I've had quite a few pivots or changes in my careers, and I don't think there's any role that I've done that didn't involve quite a significant amount of stretch. There was an element of newness, whether it was leading people for the first time, or building a team or function for the first time, or learning a new function altogether from you, or moving industry. There's always been quite a significant element of new that I'd have to get my head around and also be good at quite quickly at. So you have to back yourself that you have enough in the tank, you have enough in what you've done before and in your potential to figure things out. And I think it's easier said than done, because it's not a flick that you just switch and then now you have it, now you don't. But you have to back yourself to say yes, first of all, put yourself up for that role or for that promotion or for that change. And then back yourself that once you get there, you'll be able to figure it out. I think that's so important. And I think related to that, and one of the best pieces of advice that I've ever been given was to build for myself a network of mentors. I think often, at least in the early part of my career, I was thinking of mentors as having one mentor with a capital M and having a very formal relationship. That was my understanding of what mentorship was. And it wasn't until this mentor actually said, look, it's not just me, I'm good at X and I can advise you on X. Why don't you surround yourself by more experienced, wise, sage people that have been, have done the battles and have the scars and have the stories and the tips and the tricks, and can advise you and support you and at times encourage you and tell you that you're sane and your thinking is pretty solid.
A reassurance sometimes, isn't it? You just need somebody else to say, yes, you are doing it right.
So important. And also keep you honest. Also keep you honest, because they should be detached enough from your day to day to see you objectively. So if you're ever having a moment, to not let you be in that moment and kind of lift you up very quickly from it. So it's very important. That network of mentors for me has been very important. And it's not necessarily the same mentors throughout your career. You acquire new ones, some might drop off as you were, but it's just important to surround yourself with people that are willing and happy to share their guidance and advice with you. And I've been very fortunate in that space. But also just thinking of anyone who thinks, well, I don't have really a network of mentors, or seek them out. In my experience, people rarely say no if you are asking for a 15-minute career session or coaching session or advice on X. People often say yes, and what becomes, or what is initially a one-off, can easily become more of a regular and frequent thing. So I know I've benefited hugely from having that network of mentors. So that's been a key to perhaps me navigating certain challenging transitions.
I think that's really important what you've mentioned. And sometimes people do think it's only one person that they should lean on as a mentor, and it comes in different shapes and forms and manners. But difference of thought as well can obviously help navigate career trajectories or pieces of advice.
Hugely, and also they're great connectors, because often that individuals that have been around the block, they've been there, done that before you. They've made the mistakes. So I think even if you are solid in your thinking and you want to learn things yourself, you don't have to learn everything the hard way. Don't have to figure everything out by yourself. So do lean on people that can offer you advice and can offer you support. And like with any advice and any feedback, do put it through your own filter and take what's useful and leave out what's not. But having that support network, if I can call it that, as the mentor network, is hugely important, and they can connect you up. And I often go to some of my current mentors and say, I have a problem with X, Y, and Z, and I'm not quite sure how to navigate that. What's your advice? And it's like, if they don't know, they're like, I don't, but I have someone who I know who's been through exactly the same thing as you. Let me connect you up. And so I think it's it's valuable. However way you look at it, it's a super valuable thing to have.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've talked obviously about mentors. How about a particular role model for you that you aspired to or inspired you?
I think I've not had a one role model. I think I've always looked at the people I worked for or I worked with, not necessarily had to be more senior than me. People that I thought they were great at what they were doing, and I tried to figure out what makes them great. How do they become great? What makes them great? And if they're great, can they give me some advice about how could I be more like that? And I've been very fortunate to work for some fantastic line managers. And I remember one of my former line managers, and he was an incredible storyteller, and he was an introvert as well. On the stage, you would never tell. He was a fantastic storyteller. So I tried to figure out how to be a better storyteller myself. One of the most powerful lessons that I've learned from one of the people that I admired, who I would say a role model for me, is noticing how he made room for others in a meeting. So he made space for the quieter ones that were more reflective or more introvert, how he made sure that their voices were heard.
Yeah.
Or how he made sure that at times he'd be like, yes, that's exactly what Raluca said or what Michelle said 10 minutes ago, acknowledging that idea came originally from somewhere else. And creating space for others, I think, is one of the probably most powerful leadership lessons that I've learned and that I've tried to model myself with my own teams or with my peer set. It's so important. It's so important because, diversity is hugely important, no doubt about it, but it's not sufficient. It's not sufficient just to surround yourself or to bring diverse talent into the organization or into your team. You have to make sure that their voices are heard and they can influence decision making. And creating space for those that are not loud or vocal or extroverted is just as important as getting them in the first place. So, it wasn't a one role model. It was a series. I've also observed poor behavior or poor leadership behavior. And I've made mental notes of how not to be like or what not to do when I have a position of power or a position of influence. And for me, one of the behavior that I've seen that can be so damaging in organizations is when on the face of it, you have collective agreement to a particular course of action. But if people don't really believe in that, they leave the room and then don't do anything about it. And I think that, and it takes some time to even figure out that is happening. So I've seen in the larger organization, I've seen some of that, and I've always committed to myself that, okay, when I am in a position of power, I have some influence over decision making, even if I don't agree with your course of action. Mm-hmm. Once I've said my piece and we can agree to not agree, I still commit to action. I do not leave the room making you feel that I've agreed, and then behind closed doors I don't actually support your course of action. So I think it's important as for everyone to observe the traits of good leadership and great leadership, as well as perhaps those that are not so great. So I think it's important to have a mix of the two.
Yeah, and I think the reflecting on that, as obviously you do, is important, knowing what you don't want to be and what poor looks like as opposed to good. What would you say your style is?
I don't know that I would have. I would say it's evolved. I don't know if I would describe it in one word or two words. I've always had a high bar or a high set of standards for the people that work for me or with me on a project, but I've always held myself to the same bar and set of standards myself first. So if I
wanted or expected or asked certain behaviors or certain values of others, I wanted to make sure that I demonstrate those myself first. And I think that's been very, very important to me to make sure that I lead authentically, and at least if I ask a lot of you, you can see that I'm putting just as much, if not more, myself.
Practicing what you preach, isn't it? Otherwise, are they going to buy into you and follow you as a leader if you don't do things that you're telling them to do? So yes, I completely understand.
So yes, I think for me, that's what it is. And otherwise, or not otherwise, outside of that, it's more a case of, okay, if you have smart people and you hire smart people, let them get on with it, and don't get in the way too much. At the same time, I think for me, because often many people talk about empowering your team, it has to be matched by a culture of accountability.
Yeah.
I think if the two are not present at the same time, it doesn't work, or it's not sufficient to just have empowerment without a clear culture of accountability and ownership, and the other way is not sufficient either as well. So I think you have to have these two marry up, and then you have a really good setup for teams to function well and be high performing. But yeah, I don't know. I don't have a precise word, but I try to be authentic to myself, and try to empower as much as I can while just having that sense of accountability.
Yeah, I think what you've explained there as well is it does evolve. And it is nuanced in different organisations, but I think if you stay true to you and bring yourself to work in the way that you carry yourself, then people are going to see the you are genuine, and they're more likely to buy into you. You've mentioned culture a little bit there, Raluca. So what do you think is important from that culture perspective?
A few things. So first I would say, okay, having diverse voices, right? Having a diverse set of experiences, of backgrounds, of cultures, different genders, of course, from around the table or in the company. But I would say that in and by itself is not sufficient. So sure, that is a must-have, but you must also have a culture where it feels safe to speak up, because, and I've seen it firsthand, just the opposite of that, when people fear the consequences of challenging the status quo or challenging the leader's opinion in the room, you just never truly innovate, you never truly evolve. It's a sure way it's a slippery slope. So I think in my experience, where I've seen it really work, where not only you have diversity of thought, and you do that by hiring people from a lot of different backgrounds and people that would challenge you quite openly. And not only do you allow that, but you encourage that dissent or debate, but you make it feel safe. You make it feel safe. And I think, again, like with most things, just having one side by itself is probably good, but not sufficient. So you have to create that psychological safety in the room. And having been part of various organizations and various setups, I think for me the best outcomes from a business perspective, from a customer perspective, happen where people feel it's okay to challenge the status quo quite openly. And again, like you said earlier, there's different situations and different contexts. At times when there's maybe pressure or crisis, you kind of box in some of the debate and you kind of very focus on getting to a particular outcome very fast. But that's more the exception to the rule. And the rule must be that you've hired smart individuals, give them a platform to speak, make sure you have the room and create a space for them, for their voices, for their ideas to be heard. And then make it safe to do so and actually encourage it, not just allowing it, but actually encourage it proactively.
You mentioned a couple of really important things there, and I think the industry has come quite far in the adoption of more DE&I and that diversity of thought and having a voice. Absolutely agree. I've heard still some institutions are not quite there yet to allow that almost like psychological safety, as you said. What changes have you maybe seen within the industry in financial services, like the adoption of DE&I or the mentality around it from like navigating throughout your career?
Sure. So definitely in my 13 years in financial services, I've definitely seen changes, right, in how both large organizations and smaller ones are thinking about talent, are thinking about development and leadership potential. And I have to say, probably I've seen more change happening, or more progressive change happening in smaller organizations, in fintech space, rather than perhaps the larger ones. And one of the most interesting things that I've observed is, whereas a while back, I think everyone had a mold, including fintech, had a mold about who you needed to be and what MBA you needed to have to be part of a particular fintech or particular financial services organization. That mold is being broken now.
Yeah.
And I've seen more and more hiring based on potential and promise rather than full proficiency. There's still plenty of proficiency hiring happening, no doubt about it. But I think organization, and I think perhaps it's in fintech that I see more of that, because they are more the disruptors, the innovators, the one that really have to have that faster pace compared to perhaps a larger organization. But I've seen how they often look at someone's profile when they're hiring or when they're promoting as a mix of proficiency and potential. Whereas perhaps in other places, you say, okay, you can only do this role if you've done it for 10 years before or for 20 years before. And interestingly, I saw, this was kind of something that I'd observed more anecdotally in the industry over the last few years, but I've seen some data coming out a few days ago from Gartner, and a study that's showing companies that hire for potential, or employees that are hired or promoted based on potential rather than full proficiency, are twice as likely to perform effectively in their role. So I suppose that validates a lot of probably the instinctive set that, okay, I'm getting this individual in because I've seen what they did in their other roles. So I think they can figure out these knotty problems. Because the job, I'm looking at my own job, what I'm doing now is not what I was doing 6 months ago, is not what I did definitely 12 months ago, 18 months ago. Someone's job and the job spec evolves much faster, especially in small organizations that move fast, than the skill set and the proficiency. So you have to take a bit of not a bet, that's not the right word, or a gamble, but you have to say, okay, I've seen enough. I think you can do it. I think whatever the next 6 months will bring, whatever challenge you'll have then, you'll probably be able to figure it out. So I think that there's been a change that I've observed, which I think should be very encouraging to anyone wanting to enter the industry. And I think it's been both in large and organizations and smaller ones. I've probably seen it more in the smaller ones. It's perhaps more evident there. But I think, it should be encouraging to anyone looking to enter the industry now, because one of the blockers perhaps, or barriers, and I think, okay, I will never, it will be so hard to grow in seniority. I will have to do 10 years here and 20 years there.
We see that quite a lot.
And so when you see people's career that can flourish without necessarily having done the linear trajectory in the 20, 30 years in a particular domain, that's encouraging, right? Because you can see, okay, the careers can be more squiggly. They don't have to have a particular path to seniority. So yes, I think I've noted a change in the industry in the last few years for sure.
Yeah, I do think it's been progressive, and there's a lot of better adoption of looking at people's potential, as opposed to, do you have X, Y, and Z on a job spec requirement, where, strictly speaking, you need to be very careful about, navigating that. You've mentioned some really, I'd say, interesting points throughout our discussion, Raluca. If you could maybe sum up, because you've given lots of advice already, points that I'm taking away, but if you could sum up maybe words of wisdom or pieces of advice that you would give to maybe your younger self or younger talent coming through or people starting their career, what would that be?
It would be take a risk. Take a risk and do not let a plan or definitive plan kind of close your mind off from different possibility. Take a risk and say yes, even if you don't feel 100% ready or 100% confident, because I can tell you from first-hand experience, having worked with executive team and more recently having been part of an executive team, nobody has it 100% sussed out and figured out. There's an element of stretch truly in everybody, in everyone's role. So don't wait. Don't wait to feel ready. Don't wait for another 6 months or another 12 months, another 2 years to just acquire a little bit more of X skill and Y skill or experience. If an opportunity presents itself, make sure you're ready and take that risk and back yourself that you'll figure it out. Get your support network, your mentor network in place, and keep that always quite active and think about new people that you might want to add and have on your mentor network. And that's about it. And, for me, one of the biggest drivers of change or taking new roles or new opportunities has been I always feared more staying in my comfort zone and the consequences of staying in my comfort zone and stagnating and standing still. That was a bigger fear than the fear of change. So I would say if you're thinking, what if I fail? What if it won't work out? It might look a bit silly, it might look a bit embarrassed. What's the worst that can happen? Change that short-term lens to a longer-term lens and think about, okay, but if you don't take this opportunity, if you don't even go for it, what doors would perhaps always stay shut to you if you don't step through these doors? What reward might you miss out on later on, rather than think that right here, right now, I might look a bit silly and I might look a little bit out of my depths. You'll figure it out. There's always someone at the end of a phone that will help you.
And with that support network around, there's people to help.
There's nothing. And back yourself, reread your CV. Look at all your achievements to date. There should be a pretty good confidence boost that you can do it, that you can apply yourself to new functions or new areas or new problems or new teams or whatever it might be. But put your hand up and go for those newer learning opportunities, because there's nothing wrong with staying in your comfort zone and excelling at something, but there's more of a hope and weight in terms of hope and chance of that necessarily leading to career growth. And so if you want to be your own master of your own destiny, I would say take those risks and take them early in your career. Don't wait until the second part or later part. Take them early and make whatever mistakes early on when there's enough time to course correct. I would always encourage my younger self for sure to take those risks early, to build that mentor network early. And just go for it.
Be a master of your own destiny, as you said.
I think you need to be, right? You need to be, because we live in a tricky world, in a challenging world. So you have to be, despite any support, any network, you have to be the one in charge. You have to be the decision maker. And so it's better, for me personally, I would say it's always better to make a decision and for that to turn out to not have been the best decision, rather than look back and think,
what if?
What if? What if? And for me, the fear of what if was always greater than the fear of failure in the present. I can cope with that.
Very powerful message, Raluca, and I think some great words of wisdom there. So thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me today.
Thank you.